have this vivid memory of sitting in the bathtub one time and just crying.
I think I punched my dad once.
You're not in charge of me right now. Like, you just won't leave me alone.
I had an epidural in my back, so I couldn't move very well.
She just wanted me to keep pushing and keep going.
Everybody had one. Like, if you didn't have one, you were looked down upon.
This is a show where teenagers share their experiences growing up in today's world. I'm your host, Dr. RJ, and this is A Teen's Perspective. Hello, and welcome to A Teen's Perspective, helping parents see the future. Today's guest is going to be a very exciting topic that we're going to discuss today. But before I introduce her, we need to come up with a name because she's 14, and I always want to hide the name of, or the identity, rather, of my minors. So let me ask you to come up with a name. If you were a secret agent, let's say you're a spy or something, what name would you want to be called?
Let's just say Sneaky Pen.
I like it. Sneaky Pen. That's a cool name. So I want to welcome Sneaky Pen to the show. So Sneaky Pen is a 14-year-old high schooler. She's a freshman. And we invited her to the show because she just has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to a lot of issues in middle school and high school. But one of the big ones we want to talk about today is depression. Something Sneaky Pen did suffer from, but she overcame it. So stay tuned to listen to her story. So first, let's start off and just talk to us about just your family environment, like how you were raised.
Well, I was raised pretty much like a normal kid, good life. But around when I was 8, a lot started happening. On Valentine's Day, I found out I was adopted. And then a few years later, I found out that my parents were getting divorced. And around that time, my dad wasn't really around that much. My mom kind of distanced herself from us. And it was kind of just like me and my sister. It felt like we were just alone in the world.
Wow. And how old is your sister?
She's 23 now.
Okay, so you guys are
8 years apart.
8 years apart. Wow. And at the time, you were 8 and she was 16.
Yeah.
Wow. So talk to us about, like, you found out that you were adopted at 8 years old?
Yeah. So a crazy thing is I call it like God's gift almost, because I don't know why, but for some reason it was constantly every day I'd come home and be like, Mom, I met a new friend and she was adopted. He was adopted. But like, I didn't know what that really meant. Like, I feel like God kind of just like put it in my brain and was like, this is an important topic. Bring this up more often. That's just what I think. And then soon my mom was like, I think it's time.
Really? Wow. So did your mom make the decision just to never tell you or just wait until you're like old enough to handle it?
I think it was probably old enough to handle it. So my dad finally came down and I remember sitting down in our computer room, all of us, me, my dad, my sister, and yeah, pretty much happened from there.
Wow. And your 16-year-old, at the time she was 16.
Yeah.
Was she adopted too?
No.
Okay, but she knew that you were adopted.
Yeah.
And she didn't say anything. That's good. Young kids can sometimes not understand the severity of their words.
Yeah.
And it just never came up.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
My cousins knew, and my cousin is 6 months apart from me. And we hung out every single day, rode to school together, rode home from school together, hung out like 24 hours a day.
Wow. So what was your like initial reaction?
I mean, I was stoked, obviously. I mean, my 8-year-old brain was like, I have more parents? I thought it was kind of cool. But at the same time, I was also in tears, crying. Like, it was kind of mixed emotions. I wasn't sad. I was definitely more on the happy side. But I don't know. I just remember thinking, like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, whoa.
And how did your parents break it down to you? Like, I know you say your dad came and you guys just kind of sat down. And
yeah. I mean, I can't really remember before, but it was on Valentine's Day. And so they got me gifts, and then I unwrapped the gifts in the computer room where they told me. And then it was kind of like, I remember it getting awkward in the room. Like, it was just silence, and they looked at each other and they're like, they just nodded. And I was like, okay. But Yeah, and they just sat me down for about like 2 hours or something and just told me the whole shebang.
Wow. Now, at what point did you start to think about like wanting to meet your birth parents?
That's a good question. I never really thought about it all that much because, I don't know, I was just so caught up with everything else in life between my divorced parents and school and friends, and I was pretty big on the soccer team.
Wow.
And so I feel like my mom didn't really want me to meet my birth parents as much, but my dad was like, we definitely need to, because, I mean, it's closure.
Yeah.
You know, it's closure knowing your mom, it's closure knowing your dad, but I never got to meet my dad. That's a really long story too. We can probably get into that a little bit later if we want.
Okay. And so you're 8 years old. They tell you this news. And did you ever ask, hey, can I see pictures?
Yeah, that's because I remember asking for pictures, but I never really saw any around the house, you know? Like, not really me as like, it's just me and my sister, me and my mom, my dad. It was like never me with my actual birth mother. I mean, of course, I was like just a newborn, a couple months old, couple days old. There probably wouldn't be many pictures of me with her, but I definitely asked for pictures of just her and just of my dad. I've never seen a picture of my dad. I know he's tall, blonde-haired, blue eyes, which I definitely did not get that gene, unfortunately. But around, I'd say like 10 or 11, I finally saw a picture of my birth mom, and I was like, I don't look anything like her. But as I got older, I started seeing like more resemblance. Like our nose is the same, our eyes are the same, her hair is like relatively the same.
Yeah. And at 10, like, how did you find that picture?
Oh, okay. So I don't know why they were not discreet at all. Let me tell you. So in my room, I was short, little, you know, but in my closet, they had a bin on the highest shelf, but like my closet was not clean. So I had like miscellaneous things all over the floor. So I found a couple boxes, stacked them up, and reached up there to the tallest shelf, grabbed it down, because I was like, what is in there? You know, like I just happened to stumble upon it. I was like, what's in there? I've always wondered. And so I took it down, sat it on my bed, and I was like, and so I opened it, and I saw a pink book, and then I saw this huge photo album. And so I grabbed the pink book, start flipping through it. I still have it. I have all of these. And I start flipping through it, and it's like I'm confused. You're seeing like a baby with a woman. You're like, this is me? And so in photo albums, you know how you usually have the picture and then like commentary on the bottom and like dates and all this stuff. And so my birth mom, she documented the whole birth, the whole pregnancy. So there's like pictures of her with me in her stomach, pictures of me in her arms when I was just born. And so I was looking at them, and every time I would read them, it'd be like sneaky pen with her birth mother, sneaky pen with, you know, holding her in her arms. And so that was when I was like starting to get more curious after I saw all of those. And then I finally started asking questions.
Wow. So those 2 years you just found out, and you're just like, I don't care, and just kept going on with life. And then 10, you see that box, and that's what kind of restarted it again.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, do you mind sharing like what was the story behind the adoption?
So my mom was a teen mom at 19, and she was with her boyfriend, and they were not married. They were nothing. This story kind of dates back to when I visited her. I visit her very frequently whenever I go to my dad's in Utah. And so my mom doesn't like me seeing her, like I said before, but my dad's always like, it's closure. And so she sat me down and told me this story. And so she was 19, she had a boyfriend, and they were in college, and they met at a party, but it wasn't like a party. It was just like, you know, a casual get together, not like a frat or anything. Yeah. But they quote unquote fell in love. And then he started kind of being like domestic violence, verbally abused her, just things like that. And she tried to break up with him. He just said no. And, you know, when you're in that vulnerable state in a toxic relationship, you kind of become brainwashed. And you feel like you're trapped in that relationship. And I think that's what she felt, not being able to break up with him, being verbally abused, brainwashed, all this. And so she just stopped hanging out with him, tried to avoid all she could on campus. And finally, how long can you avoid someone that you've known for all this time and had a relationship with? You can't really avoid them very well, especially when you go to college together. And so she finally had the guts to stand up to him and was like, I am breaking up with you. And it's for the better for us. And he hated it. He hated that she finally stood her ground. He hated that she showed her dominance. So I remember her saying that after that, it was like a year. They didn't talk. She blocked him and all this. And then finally, they lived together in the dorm or something like that. And so she went to her other friend's dorm, stayed there for a while, but didn't take any of her things, just a couple pieces of clothing, her toiletries. And so he finally said, you need to come back and get all your stuff and move permanently to the other dorm. And so she went to go back to get her stuff, and he kind of was like, none of her stuff was there. And she was like, why did you tell me to come here and none of my things are here? And they got in an argument about that. And then later on, he definitely took advantage of her.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so she was silent about it for a pretty long time until she found out she was pregnant with me. A blessing, though. But it was a very long story from there with court cases, and I don't know. But I'm just very thankful to be here. That's all I gotta say.
Thanks for sharing that, story. When did your mom share that story with you?
Well, thing is, it wasn't my mom, but my dad. I went over to his house in Utah when I was visiting, and I don't know what brought it up, but I was like, hey, can you tell me more about? And then my mom that I have now, she never brought it up. I'd ask questions, she'd avoid the conversation. But my dad, he was finally like, it's time to tell you the story. And so he sat me down and just told me, he didn't want to get into complete detail with it because he wanted my birth mom to tell me everything. And so he kind of told me the basics, like they weren't married, they were young, just things like that.
Wow. So walk us through your parents' decision to adopt.
My parents couldn't have any more kids, and they wanted another kid. So after my sister continuously was like, I need a brother or sister. I hate being an only child. And so my parents thought about it for like 2 years. My sister asked for me for her birthday, Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving, any opportunity she could to get a little bit closer to not being an only child. She took it. And yeah.
So after asking for 2 years,
Yeah.
your parents finally decided to do it. Mm-hmm. And did they share with you the process of how long it took and how they found you?
Yeah. So they were continuously going through adoption programs. They were going through disability programs, kids with disabilities. They were going to take in, whoever they could. They didn't care who you were, what problems you had. They were accepting to anyone. And so after all the programs kind of like turned them out, they were like, sorry, we don't have anything right now. She finally went through a paper book, which I don't understand, but she was going through a paper book, and for days they were like, we can't find anyone who has a child that we can adopt. And the funny thing is that my birth mother, she had a dream one night that I was meant to be put up for adoption. And she said that she even envisioned my parents' faces.
Wow.
And she said from then on, I knew who the parents were going to be. I was going to give up my child. And so my birth mother found my parents, like, I think they were in a book too, or online, asking for like adoption programs, things like that. And so she stumbled upon them and then they stumbled upon her. And so they kind of just, they talked it out. They were like, I think we found a child.
Wow. And your birth mom, she was pregnant with you at the time when they found each other?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And she was saying for months, the whole time she was pregnant, she didn't know whether to give me up for adoption, whether to keep me. And so her saying that she had that dream really gave her, it really clarified that her choice was to put me up for adoption.
So your mom and dad were there for the birth?
Yes.
Cool.
So they were there through the whole process.
And when did the exchange happen?
I think the next day after I was born.
Okay, so you stayed with your mom, the birth mom, for that night.
Yeah.
And then they officially completed the adoption.
Yeah.
Wow. So when you're looking at that, your parents, you're growing up 8 years old, you never thought hey, I don't look like you guys.
Yeah, I know. But I guess I don't know. I guess I never really thought about that. But obviously I'm I don't look like any of my parents. Maybe just a recessive gene.
Right. It's so funny because it's 4 of us and we're all tall. So I'm 6'5", my brother's 6'8", and then my other sister's 5'11".
Yeah.
And I have one sister who's 5'5", and we're hey, wait a minute. I'm are you sure you're a part of us here?
Yeah.
Okay, you found the boxes at 10, and then you started asking questions.
Yeah.
And then what age were you when you first met your birth mom?
I gotta say maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So.
Oh, it was pretty recent.
Yeah. So 12, 11, something like that. I can't remember exactly how old I was.
And was it just because your mom was trying to avoid you meeting her? Is that what took so long, or is it just because of timing?
I think it was because of timing. She was going through a lot. She didn't just have me. She also had 3 other kids. So I have 2 other brothers and 1 sister. But since last year, she had another kid.
Wow.
And so now I have a baby little sister.
Wow. And where are your other siblings?
They live with her in Utah. And then I have 8 siblings, actually. They're all over the place. I can get into it if you want.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have 4 other siblings that my birth mom had. I'm the 5th out of that family. And so
you're the young,
I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest, okay.
And my birth mom and I like to call him my dad, since I've never really met my dad, but their marriage, since they had those other 4 kids.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. And then my dad I have now, my mom I have now, me, Whitney, so that's another sibling. And then my parents got divorced, and my dad got remarried to my lovely stepmom, Anna. And Anna has 3 other kids, and they are 21 and over.
Wow.
So I kind of have the age group of siblings all over the place.
Yeah, see that?
From the age group from 8 to 11, 8 to 12, I think. And then I have 21 to 28, and then I'm 14.
Now, it sounds like you have an amazing attitude about all this.
I'm truly grateful to have it all. I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't change anything.
Wow. So let's rewind back. Around that same time, 8 years old, your parents also got a divorce. So share with us your feelings, your emotions during that time.
Yeah. So I was definitely young. So, I didn't know the true meaning of depression, like sorrow, sadness. But I definitely felt alone, and I became very independent at a very young age because I was just keeping myself busy, sometimes making myself food, science projects, all this stuff. I can't remember a time where I really felt sad or trapped until farther on when I was able to comprehend what it really was.
Oh, okay. So at 8, you just didn't really get it. So
No,
you just kind of kept going and staying busy.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think of it as I was so busy when I was little. I was a very creative kid. I would not literally blow up the house, but flour everywhere, vinegar and baking soda, volcanoes, robotics. I loved robotics as a kid. What else? Oh, since we moved from Utah to Texas here, we had a ton of cardboard boxes. And let me tell you, those were like, they were my prized possessions. I built a 2-story house of cardboard boxes.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. And
So it sounds like when they were going through this divorce, they didn't have to worry as much about you because it seemed like you were still a happy kid.
oh yeah,
And just,
my sister was definitely, she was older, so she was going through a lot. She actually kind of distanted herself from kind of the situation, and like just feelings, she kind of just locked her feelings out, kind of became like emotionless, a robot kind of, but she definitely had friends there for her. I remember that.
Oh, okay. So when did you notice that about your sister, that she was like actively trying to distance herself from you guys?
I kind of just remember she was always in her room, but like that's kind of a teenager thing. But she was always in her room. I would never play with her. I mean, we're 8 years apart, but you know, she's 16 and I'm 8 or so. And so she never really played with me. I'd go and try and talk to her. I'd be like, hey, you want to come do this with me? We can go outside, we can play, ride bikes. Nope, nothing. Nothing would crack her. I always tried to make her food, even though I was like, it was probably horrible. But, you know, I thought I was being a good sister. Anything I could really try and like have fun with her, I definitely attempted to do that. And I remember just like, it was just me in the house pretty much. It felt like 8 hours a day when it wasn't the weekends. My mom worked. So it's kind of just like me in the house, it felt like. But I mean, I kind of enjoyed that. I'm not going to lie.
Wow. And describe the conversation they had with you guys to let you know that they were officially going to separate.
So that's also a story. So when my dad came to town, he never stayed in the house because they just weren't, they thought it was better if not. And so I would always stay at a hotel with him. And finally, he brought us to a hotel, and I remember him sitting me down on the bed. And, you know, I've never seen my dad cry. Never. I've never really seen him but happy at that time. And so seeing him cry, and he was trying to spit it out and say it and tell me in the best way he could. But like, to me, I remember him being like, it was so emotionally devastating for him to tell me that they were getting divorced. I was like, are you okay? Do you have cancer? Do you have, you know, I mean, I didn't know they were going to get a divorce. So I was just saying like the most obvious thing that I thought could be the problem. So I was like, are you sick? You know, is something wrong? But it was definitely hard for him, but he ended up telling me they were getting divorced. And we were just sitting there for hours just talking about it. And in the end, it was happy, but in the beginning, it was definitely very, very, very sad.
And what was your reaction?
I remember just being like, whoa, this is like, whoa. It was like, I didn't even know what was going to happen. Because I've never really, like, when you're little and you think about not having both parents at home all the time, I mean, it was kind of normal for me, but like for it to be forever that way, I thought it was just like a short-term thing, but divorce is long-term, obviously. But I didn't believe it. I didn't. And I was like, so what's going to happen now? That was kind of my perspective of it. What's going to happen now?
And how did they kind of reassure you that you guys would still be a family?
Visits, coming down for Christmas, family gatherings. My dad would come down, like, I'd say every month or two to see me, even though he was going through tough times with money. But he still, no matter what, managed to come down and see me.
That's awesome. So you already shared the timing, but when did you reach the point where it was depression? Because it seemed like before then you were kind of like, I'm sure your parents may have been shocked that you were just handling everything so well.
Yeah.
You're still this happy kid and all this, finding out that you were adopted and then we're getting divorced and you're still just playing with the boxes.
Yeah.
So at some point it had to kind of like, there was a huge change. And what brought that change on?
It was definitely in the time frame of 5th grade to 8th grade. So more middle school And then end of elementary school is when I finally started to get the gist of things. It was like I just needed someone else besides what I already had. That sounds like really unthankful, but I just needed someone else to talk to. And so as time went on, it just got worse and worse, and it eventually took over me, the depression. And I just became this like robot. Like I was emotionless. I was just moping around the house. I began emotionally eating. That was kind of my way of coping. And it was just hard, really hard. And so my family started noticing, and I didn't know I needed a counselor that bad, because when you're there in that state, you're kind of just like everything's paused. So you don't really notice, like, you don't notice the obstacles. You don't notice your surroundings all that much. You're just like so self-aware of like your emotions, and you kind of get lost in it. And my family was like, you need a counselor. And so like that was my way of talking to someone else when my father was not there. So that's the way I kind of handled that.
So your father not being there, you mentioned that he comes to visit you on holidays, but did you guys just not talk on the phone much at all?
I'm not much of a phone talker.
Oh, okay. So you're more just in person kind of hanging out.
And I definitely get beat up for that by everyone in my family, but like in a fun way, in a funny way.
So basically, second grade, you're cool. Third grade, still cool. Fourth grade, fifth grade. What's so special about fifth grade where you felt like you needed someone to talk to?
I don't remember what triggered it, honestly. I just remember everything kind of just got a little bit more dull. And I just felt like, you know how people talk about as a kid, life's perfect. You have no worries. And then you finally hit that stage of realizing real world. I feel like that's definitely when I figured that out, fifth grade. And from there, the real world just got tougher.
Wow. And during this stage of depression, were you aware that you were considered?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you were aware of it. Okay.
I was like, I definitely knew I was depressed. And my friends saw it too. And I think my depression started rubbing off on different people. And that's when I was like, is it that bad? You know? And I just remember days on days on days felt like months, years. And then I started noticing it a lot when I went to counseling, and she would talk about things I felt and things that made me sad, things like that. And so when she brought all these things up, it really made me think like, oh dang, like it came on strong. And I kind of fell into like a hole, and I started physically harming. And the counselor I didn't feel like it was helping. I feel like it was making me even more in the hole, made me deeper in the hole. Because she just, like I said, she just brought out, I feel like she was just like ripping out all my insecurities and laying them on a table in front of me. And it was like an eye-opener. And so I was like, am I really this bad of a person? Am I ugly? Am I overweight? You know, just things like that. And so I hated myself. And so that's when I started self-harming.
Wow. So your parents decided to have you see a counselor because they were noticing that you were depressed.
Yes.
And did they ever tell you like what exactly did they notice?
No, they did not.
They were just like, hey, it's time. Let's have you see a counselor.
Yeah.
And were you open to it?
In the beginning, I was like, I definitely think I just need to get in the better mindset. So I was definitely open to it. I wanted to get better. You know, like a normal person, they want to get better. They don't want to be stuck in a rut, you know?
So whenever you realized that it was not helping, what actions did you take then? I mean, I know you say you started to move towards self-harm, but did you ask your parents to stop going to counseling?
No.
Okay.
I mean, in the end, I was like, I don't think I want to anymore. But obviously they thought it'd be the best for me. They just thought it would just take a little bit more time, but time didn't heal what needed to be healed.
When you started self-harm, share with us like inside of your mind. Let us understand the thoughts that would cause you to want to harm yourself.
I just thought I was meaningless. I thought I was ugly. I thought just all these horrible, the worst things you could think onto yourself is what was going through my head. And I just got to a point where I was like, there's nothing to me anymore. Why not just hurt myself? I'm already hurting on the inside, so why not just hurt on the outside? And it wasn't so much a cry for suicide. It was just it was like my way to cope.
Got it. And when you have self-harming, the kids do it different ways. So what was your way of coping?
I started cutting myself and emotional eating and just horrible things for me. I fell into boys, just liking boys when I never really thought of being in a relationship at so young. My mental state was just so horrible. I fell into all these things that were just definitely not good for me.
How did you hide the cutting from your parents?
Long sleeves.
Really? And they didn't notice anything?
No, I'm pretty good at hiding things, but it was during the winter. So, long sleeves, normal attire. But it's when summer came and I had to wear short sleeves because I didn't want to roast in the heat in Texas.
Texas, yes.
So I wore short sleeves and I obviously couldn't do my wrists. I couldn't do my arms. So I started doing my shoulders where the sleeve would cover. And I would start doing higher on my legs where the shorts would cover. Anywhere, somewhere clothing could cover, it was just like calling my name, what it felt like.
Did your friends have an idea that this was going on?
Yes. My closest friend, she knew.
And what was her response to it?
It kind of ruined our relationship. I kind of started pushing her out, and then I started doing this to myself, and she was like, this is not good for you. And I think she was separating herself from me because she didn't want to be around the energy that I was putting out. And it just tore us apart. And when she realized, she did tell other people. And my closest friend, 8 years I probably have known her, and she told other people. And that was devastating for me.
Yeah. And when you say tell other people, of your peers or adults?
Peers.
Oh, man. And what was the response from that?
I was called a cutter.
That's the name for it?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
That's what they called me.
And what was your reaction?
I mean, it's a form of being bullied, is name calling. People texted me on Snapchat and Instagram, and they were like, why do you cut? Are you depressed? They'd start calling me all these awful names, and it tore me down even more than I was already broken.
Wow. And at this time, your parents still not really knowing what's going on?
Mm-mm. I told no one.
Schools, the principals, teachers, they had no clue?
No, I was just isolating myself.
Now, during this time, how were your grades?
Oh, I was failing every class.
And no one thought anything was weird by that?
They just thought it was my ADD, ADHD, and I kind of went with it. I was like, I just don't understand the material. Maybe I have a learning disability. I don't know. I came up with every excuse because it's devastating to have to tell your parents what you're doing to yourself, So I came up with everything I could just to not tell them.
Now, explain to me and some of the audience, just the idea that you were depressed and you wanted to be better. You want to feel better. But then you reached a point where you're just content with your emotions and you started cutting yourself. While you're in this state of self-harm, did you no longer want to be better?
I mean, deep down, I wanted to be better. But at that point, I didn't feel like there was an option. I just felt like I'm sad and it's going to stay like that for a while. I thought there was a miracle or something was just going to come over me and just take it and I'd be fine. But, it doesn't happen that way.
And this didn't come up in your counseling session either.
No.
Wow. The good news is you overcame all of this. So share with us, what was that process of overcoming this?
One way I coped was exercise. I loved going to the gym. I actually started to love school. It was a place of mental torture before, and then when I finally decided I needed to get better, it became like my safe haven. It was just like a way to get away, I loved learning. I became a failing student to an honors straight A student.
Wow.
And something just clicked. And I feel like school was a way for me to just get out of everything, and it had extracurriculars, so I involved myself in choir, theater, things like that. It really helped me.
Wow. So what was the breaking point? Because it's like you don't think things would be better, and you're involved in self-harm. And what was the breaking point where you're like, hey, I'm going to get better?
When my parents found out.
Oh, wow. So yeah, talk to us about when they found out.
So they found out when I was wearing short sleeves and we were watching TV, and I kind of like I was adjusting myself on the couch, to get comfortable. And so I moved over a little bit, and my shoulder kind of rose and my shirt got tugged back. And so it revealed what was there. And my sister noticed it, and she was like, what is that? Like, you can't just, and I was like, oh, I fell down at school and I scraped my arm on the concrete. But cuts don't look like that. Cuts don't look like scrapes. And they're not just going to be straight lines, Scrapes are not straight, perfect lines. And so my mom asked me, and she was like, I need you to tell me right now, what is that? And I had to tell her, and it broke my heart. It broke my heart so much. I was like, I'm in this rut, and I now need to get out. I have now emotionally hurt someone else. Like, it's devastating for a parent to realize that their kid has been doing this themselves. You don't want to see your kid self-harming. And that's when I knew I needed to get better.
Wow. And thinking that sending a person to a counselor would be like the medicine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how you fix it. But it seems like that's not for everyone, right?
No.
And it shows you the type of person you are, because you're such a loving person that what pulled you out of it was the fact that you hurt someone else. When you think of someone who's depressed, you think of it, they're more just focused on themselves and that they feel bad. They don't really think about others. But that is the one thing that kind of pulled you out of it.
Yeah.
Wow. Walk us through the steps of healing at that point.
It was definitely starting to love myself. Finally to accept that I am who I am. Whether, say I am ugly, say I was fat, say all these things that I hated about myself. I had to learn to love them. And it was tough. It was probably the most tough emotional thing I've ever had to do.
Knowing those things, like what was your actual steps to doing that? It's like your mom found out. So that night, I'm certain that they probably were recommending you to go back to counseling or doing something like that.
I can't remember the steps. It was just more of like a healing process more than steps.
Got it. So it was just more so time. Just
Yes.
more waking up and starting to think that you love yourself.
Yeah.
And just doing it over and over. So it was almost like that miracle you were talking about. And so how long ago did that happen?
Probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Started in 6th grade and 7th grade.
How long did it take for you to be officially like, you felt like you were back to yourself?
This year.
Oh, okay. So this is the year.
Yes,
Wow.
this is the year.
Yeah, this is the year. That is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone else who could possibly be going through your experience, whether it's at the early stages or even self-harm, what can you share with them?
You will get through it. Learn to love yourself and understand that see yourself through other people's eyes. I used to say I look at myself through the devil's eyes. But I started to look at myself. I looked through my mom's eyes, what she saw that night. And I almost like felt it. And just for people to know that change is possible and that it's out there, and it may take years to find. It may take months. It may take a special someone, but just learn to love yourself and just be in the moment. My family told me not to be in my head so much and to just be more active and start hanging around the people that you like. Start hanging around the people that make you feel good. Like my friend, after she did that, I had to kind of push her out, and I pushed out the negativity, brought in the positive, and that's really what I would say to other people.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And you're a freshman this year, so you've made it through 6 months of high school. So what do you think about high school so far?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it.
I think you made a great statement saying to push the negativity out and surround yourself by positivity. Well, what action did you take so you can have that? I mean, I know one was that you pushed one of your friends out, but how did you gain more positive friends and have more of a positive influence?
I started involving myself in more positive things and stopped being so isolated and closed off. And I just more of like just being involved in more positive things. Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we thank you so much for sharing your story. I, without question, believe that it's going to help someone out there. So I thank you so much for sharing that. And I also want to thank my audience for supporting what we're trying to do here. But before we let you go, and what was your name again?
Sneaky Pen.
Sneaky Pen. So before I let you go, Sneaky Pen, do you have anything you would like to share with parents?
Stay active in your child's life and play with them when you don't want to play with them, and talk to them when you don't want to talk to them. That may sound horrible, but we know we all go through it. And just be a little selfless sometimes. Yeah, and thank you.
When it comes to teenagers, coaching is so effective because we use proven techniques that help teens identify goals and develop actionable plans to achieve them. If you're a parent and you want to learn how to use these coaching techniques to coach your own teen, visit us at coachyourteen.com. Sneaky Pen shared her experience with depression. Parents, if you had a teen who suffered from depression, please join our Facebook group so you can share their stories. You can find us by searching A Teen's Perspective. There's so much to discuss about this interview, but what I want to share with parents is how to have a prevention mindset. So as you know, I'm an orthodontist, and in orthodontics, we always think prevention. That is the reason why we see kids so young, because we know that if we can find out at an early age that there are potential problems and we can do something about them, then we can avoid those 5 years in braces that you hear about. Or maybe you have experienced having like 6 teeth taken out. All that could have been avoided. When it comes to parenting teenagers, it's the same. You want to have a prevention mindset. So the way you can develop a prevention mindset is to first discover what is the norm. What is the social norm? So when you're looking at your teenager, and most parents notice certain things about their teenagers that are different than their peers. That is the first step. It's just identifying what those things are. So let's say, for instance, your daughter, maybe she is bigger than all of her peers. And you look on her social media and all of the influencers that she follow, they're smaller. And let's say that when she speaks about some of the girls at her school, you found out that all of them were small. So that gives you a glimpse into what she thinks is the norm, even though at this moment, it may not be a big deal to her. Maybe she's happy and it doesn't bother her at all. But later on, it can. So it's a great idea to start having those conversations now. It's a great idea to start allowing her to share her thoughts about body image. Because once you open the door to have that conversation, then she'll be more comfortable speaking with you about issues that may come up. So I'll give you another example. Let's say, for instance, your son loves sports. Let's say he loves basketball, but he used to play and he wasn't really that good. So now he doesn't play basketball, but all of his friends play basketball and he loves watching basketball on TV and he always talks about basketball. Even though your son may seem happy now, it may bother him later on. So it's a great idea to start having that conversation because to your son, basketball is the norm. And if he's not playing basketball, then sometimes teens can internalize that and think that something is wrong with them. Why am I not playing basketball? Or why am I not tall enough or strong enough or gifted enough? Something's wrong with me. These are thoughts that are crossing their minds. So it's best for the parent to start having those conversations. So the point of this is trying to identify a potential problem before it happens. So don't wait until your son loses motivation later on for something else when all along he's been entertaining thoughts associated with that he's not good enough because he can't play basketball like all of his friends. Because to your son, basketball is the norm and he's not the norm. So I hope that makes sense and I hope that helps. The key is to pay attention to your teen. The things that you are noticing that are different, definitely have those conversations so your teen will feel more comfortable sharing their thoughts about them. Well, I hope this interview will help in some way with the relationship between you and your teen. Thank you for listening and thank you so much for all of your support. Please review, rate, and subscribe, and share with a friend. Once again, I'm your host, Dr. RJ, and this is A Teen's Perspective. Let's go.